She was just 8 when her stepmother left her die on the dusty trail. No food, no family, no mercy. But fate wasn't finished with her yet, because the richest cowboy in the West was about to ride by and change her life forever. The Wyoming Territory, spring of 1887. Wind howled across the open prairie like a mourning widow, carrying dust, tumbleweed, and the echoes of wagon wheels that had long gone silent. The sun wasn't shining so much as it was punishing, a molten coin nailed to the sky, unblinking and merciless. And somewhere on that cracked stretch of nowhere, a little girl stumbled to the trail dust, barefoot and alone. Her name was Clara May Hensley, 12 years old, and already more acquainted with heartbreak than most old-timers who sat outside saloons swapping stories about dead horses and bad women. Her stepmother, Martha Hensley, had left her there 3 hours earlier, though Clara had stopped keeping count after her tears dried to salt on her cheeks. She remembered the way Martha had said it. "Go on now, girl. Don't look at me with them eyes. Ain't nobody wants another mouth that don't earn its keep." Then she'd slapped the mule reins, and the wagon had rolled away, leaving Clara in a cloud of red dust and disbelief. Her feet hurt, her throat burned, but her spirit, that stubborn Hensley spark her late mother always bragged about, refused to lie down and die. Clara had been born under a streak of bad luck. Her pa was a prospector who never struck gold, and her mama, Lila, had been a songbird of a woman who'd loved him anyway. But when Lila caught the fever and went cold in the grave before Clara's 8th birthday, Pa married Martha, a woman who smiled only when someone else was suffering. Within a year, Pa fell from a ridge chasing a fool's vein of gold. The sheriff found what was left of him, and Martha found the deed to their wagon and the last of his coins. After that, Clara stopped being a daughter and became that little burden. By midday, the girl's lips were cracked and her head spun. Coyotes yipped in the distance, too far to see but close enough to remind her what waited for the week. She stumbled toward a dry creek bed, clutching the only thing she owned, a tiny silver locket on a frayed string. Inside was her mama's picture, faded and smiling, with the words from my brave Clara scratched on the back. She whispered to it now, "Mama, if you can hear me, I could use a miracle, maybe even a sip of water." That's when she heard it, the low, rhythmic thunder of hooves. She blinked through the heat shimmer and saw them. 6 riders cresting the hill, dust swirling like a storm behind them. Clara froze, half hopeful, half scared. Out here, men on horseback could mean rescue or ruin. The lead rider sat tall on a coal-black stallion, broad-shouldered with a long duster coat that fluttered in the wind. His hat shadowed his face, but she could tell from the way the others followed his lead. This was no ordinary cowboy. The riders slowed when they saw her. One of them even whistled. "Hey, Silas," one called. "You seeing what I'm seeing? Looks like a ghost in a dress." The leader reined in his horse. His voice was deep, gravelly, carrying the weariness of a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little. "That ain't no ghost, Jed. That's a girl." Clara's knees gave out just as he dismounted. When she woke, it was to the smell of leather, horses, and campfire coffee. She was lying under a canvas tarp, her head resting on something soft. Someone's rolled-up coat. The tall man she'd seen earlier sat beside the fire, sipping from a tin cup. He looked older up close, 40, maybe 45, with a beard flecked in gray and eyes as sharp as winter steel. "'Bout time you came to," he said, glancing her way. "You scared half my crew thinking you was a haunt." Clara tried to sit up. Where am I?" "About 30 miles north of Dust Hollow," he said. "And from the looks of it, you ain't supposed to be here." The others chuckled softly around the fire. One of them, a thin man with missing teeth, leaned forward. "What's a kid do alone out on the trail?" Clara swallowed hard. "My stepmother left me." That shut them up fast. The tall man's expression darkened. "She left you?" Clara nodded, eyes glistening. "Said I weren't worth keeping." He exhaled slowly, then tossed his coffee into the fire where it hissed and steamed. "What's your name, girl?" "Clara May Hensley." He studied her face for a long moment, like he was reading something written in invisible ink. "Silas Boone," he finally said, tipping his hat. "Owner of Boone Hollow Ranch." Her breath hitched. She'd heard that name before. Everyone had. Silas Boone, the wealthiest cattleman in 3 counties. They said he could buy half of Wyoming if he wanted to, but he preferred to own only what couldn't talk back. Horses, land, and trouble. Guess that makes you my problem now, he muttered. By the next morning, Clara was riding in a supply wagon toward Boone Hollow, wrapped in a blanket and sandwiched between feed sacks. She'd never seen so much land in her life. Rolling plains that went on forever, dotted with cattle, windmills, and skies so blue it hurt to look at. Boone rode ahead, silent as a storm cloud. When they reached the ranch, Clara's eyes widened. It wasn't just big. It was a kingdom. Barns, bunkhouses, corrals, and a main house with white trim and a porch big enough to hold a dance. A cook with flour on her apron hurried out to meet them. Lord, Silas, you finally bring home something besides trouble? Boone ignored her quip. Get this girl fed and a bed made. She's staying. The cook raised an eyebrow. Staying? Since when you collect strays? Boone's jaw tightened. Since I said so. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Every shadow reminded her of Martha's angry eyes. She sat up, clutching her locket, and crept to the window. Outside, she saw Boone sitting on the porch alone, smoking and staring at the moon. Something in his stillness made her ache. Next morning, when she brought him coffee as thanks, he grunted, "Ain't no need for gratitude. You'll earn your keep here like everyone else." "I can work," she said quickly. "I can clean or feed chickens, or—" He cut her off. "We'll see. Just don't cry. Can't stand crying." "I ain't cried since Mama died," she said softly. Boone looked at her again, and for the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition. Pain. Maybe even guilt. Weeks passed. Clara worked harder than any ranch hand. Mucking stalls, fetching water, mending fences. She grew strong. Brown from the sun. Quieter. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she sang the lullabies her mommy used to hum. And every time, Silas Boone stopped what he was doing and listened. He'd never admit it, but she reminded him of her, the woman he'd loved and lost years ago, when gold and greed had torn his heart apart. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that fate had dropped this girl in his path for a reason. Then, one night, a rider arrived from town, dusty, nervous, and carrying a letter. Boone opened it by lamplight, his eyes narrowing. "Silas Boone," it read, "you are harboring a girl who is the rightful heir to the Hensley claim near Devil's Basin. Her stepmother has filed for custody and demands a return. By law, you are to release her within 7 days." He crushed the letter in his fist. Boone Hollow and the girl who wouldn't cry. So that was it. The girl wasn't just a lost child. She was sitting on land worth a fortune. And Martha Hensley wanted her back. Boone sat long into the night, staring into the fire. "Blast it," he muttered. "That witch ain't getting her claws on that girl again." But as dawn crept over the prairie, one thought haunted him. What if taking Clara and had nothing to do with mercy, and everything to do with his own past sins? Because deep down he knew something the others didn't. The Hensley claim near Devil's Basin, the land Clara's pa had died chasing, used to belong to Silas Boone, and it had been stolen in blood. The rooster at Boone Hollow never knew the word mercy. It crowed before the sun had even thought about stretching, its cry echoing across the barn roofs and through the thin panes of the bunkhouse. The ranch hands groaned. The cows didn't care. And from the little loft above the tack room, Clara May Hensley sat up straight as a musket barrel. She was still getting used to waking in a bed that didn't rattle like wagon wheels. Straw tick patch quilt, a chipped basin. Luxuries for a girl who'd slept on dirt 2 weeks ago. She whispered a thank you to her mama's picture, splashed her face with cold water, and tiptoed out before the cook's bell rang. By the time the men stumbled toward the corral yawning, Clara had already filled the troughs and swept the porch. The cook, Miss Birdie, a stout woman with arms like bread dough and temper like gunpowder, watched from the kitchen window, muttering, "That child's got more grit than the whole outfit combined." Silas Boone walked out from the main house, hat low, coffee steaming in one hand. He paused, watching the tiny figure hauling feed sacks half her weight. She's been up since before dawn again, Bertie called. Boone grunted. So have I. Difference is, you're half asleep and she's half angel. Boone didn't answer. He just sipped his coffee, pretending the steam was interesting. When Clara noticed him, she straightened up, wiped her hands on her skirt, and said, "Mornin', Mr. Boone. I fed your chickens. They don't seem to like me yet." "They don't like nobody," he replied. Then, softer, "You can call me Silas if you want." Her eyes widened like he'd just offered her the stars. "Yes, sir. Silas. A girl among cowboys." Boone Hollow was a man's world, spit, sweat, and saddle grease. The hands weren't used to having a child around, much less one who corrected their grammar and said grace at lunch. At first, they teased her. "Careful, Jed," one joked. "She'll start preaching if you cuss near her." "Wouldn't hurt you none," Clara shot back. "Might clean your mouth before the Lord does it with soap." The men roared. Even Silas hid a smile behind his cup. By the end of the week, every cowboy at Boone Hollow was half in love with the kid. She patched shirts, shined boots, and told stories about talking coyotes and heroic chickens. But what no one could miss was her refusal to cry. Once, she sliced her palm fixing a fence post. Bertie ran for bandages, expecting tears. Clara just pressed a rag to it and said, "Pain's just proof you're still kicking." Boone overheard and felt something twist in his chest, a mix of pride and guilt. One night, after the ranch went quiet, Boone sat alone in his office, turning that cursed letter from Martha Hensley over and over in his hand. He could have thrown it into the fire. Should have, but he didn't. Instead, he poured himself a finger of whiskey and stared at Clara's handwriting practice sheet, lying beside it. Her wobbly letters spelled, "Dear Mama in Heaven, I think Mr. Boone pretends to be grumpy, but he's kind inside." Boone slammed the whiskey down. "Damn it, Lila," he whispered to the ghost of the woman he'd once loved. "What do I do with her?" Outside, thunder grumbled across the plains. By dawn, the clouds had burst open, drenching the land. The creek swelled. Fences groaned and cattle bawled in confusion. Boone was saddling up when Clara ran into the barn, hair plastered, clutching a lantern. "You can't go alone," she cried. "The river's rising. You'll drown." "Somebody's got to move the herd to high ground," he said, cinching his saddle. "Then I'm going too." "You ain't." She planted her little boots. "I worked here same as any hand." "You said so yourself." He froze. She had him there. So against his better judgment, he let her ride double behind him. The rain hit like nails. Mud splattered their faces. Wind howled so fierce it stole curses right from their mouths. By the time they reached the north pasture, the creek had turned into a raging brown monster. Boone barked orders. "Jed, drive him left. Hank, open the gate." Clara spotted a calf stuck in the mud, bawling for its mama. Without thinking, she slid off the horse and ran. "Clara, don't." Too late. She grabbed the calf's tail, yanked with all her strength, and both tumbled backward into the muck. Boone leapt down, hauled them out, soaked to the bone. "Girl, you try and die?" She spat mud, grinning. "No, sir. Just Savon one that couldn't save itself." He stared, speechless. Then he laughed, a deep, booming sound that startled even him. For the first time in years, Silas Boone laughed. When they returned, Bertie fussed over them both. Clara sneezed 6 times, got scolded twice, and was tucked into bed with peppermint tea. Boone stood in the doorway watching her drift asleep, mumbling half-dream words about cows and angels. He turned to leave, then she whispered, "Night, Pa." The word froze in mid-step. She was already asleep. Boone stepped outside into the rain again, where no one could see the tears he swore he didn't have. The stranger at the gate. 2 days later, the mud had dried, but trouble rode in fresh. A wagon pulled up bearing a woman in black, sharp-eyed, smiling like a viper. Mrs. Martha Hensley announced the ranch hand. Boone felt his jaw clench. "What in blazes do you want?" She stepped down daintily, umbrella in hand though the sun blazed overhead. "My stepdaughter. I've come to reclaim what's mine." "Lady, that girl ain't a piece of furniture," Boone growled. Martha smirked. "Loss is otherwise. Sheriff will be here in 2 days. You best have her ready." Then she leaned close, voice sweet as venom. "You always had a weakness for the helpless, Silas. Pity you never could tell when you were the one being played." She turned and left a trail of perfume and poison. Boone watched her go, fists trembling. Inside the barn, Clara brushed her favorite mare, unaware that her past had just come riding back for her. That night, Boone couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling until dawn burned through the window. When he finally got up, he went to Clara's little loft. She was awake, already lacing her boots. "Morning, Silas," she chirped. "Clara," he said slowly, "if someone came say you belong to him, what would you do?" She frowned. "Ain't nobody owns me. Mama said God made us free." Boone nodded once, hard. "Good answer." He turned to leave, hat shadowing his face. "Pack your things, kid. We're going on a ride." "Where to?" "Someplace the law don't ride too fast." The sheriff, the secret, and the ride to Devil's Basin. The sun was still dragging its lazy self up over Boone Hollow when the ranch yard came alive. Chickens scattered, horses stamped nervously, and a storm of whispered worry brewed among the ranch hands. Because when Silas Boone said, "Pack your things," he didn't mean for a picnic. He meant they were running. Clara folded her few belongings into a flour sack, one torn dress, her mama's faded picture, and the locket Boone had found half buried in the trail just the day he met her. Miss Birdie tried to keep her voice steady. "You don't gotta go, sugar. Mr. Boone's just spooked. Is all. The law'll see what's right." But Clara looked up, eyes wide with something old, something no child should carry. The law didn't stop her last time. Birdie blinked hard, pretending she had something in her eye. "Then you listen to him, you hear? That man's got more heart than he'll ever admit." Outside, Boone was tightening the girth strap on his big gray horse. His face was stone, his eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep. "Got what you need?" he asked when Clara appeared. "Yes, sir." He nodded once. "Then let's ride before the sheriff comes sniffing." The sheriff's visit. They were a half-mile down the dusty road when the sheriff's wagon rolled up the opposite ridge, trailed by 2 deputies. Sheriff Jedediah Crane, a man whose mustache could have been declared a separate county, climbed down from his seat. "Morning, Birdie." "Where's Boone?" Birdie wiped her hands on her apron. "Stalling." "Why?" "He's out back checking the north fence." Crane squinted. "Funny. One of my boys said he seen him heading south." "Must have been mistaken," Birdie said sweetly. The sheriff sighed. "Martha Hensley's claims got the governor's stamp." Birdie. "Law's law. You know Boone's heart's big enough to break, but I can't let him steal a child." "Then maybe the law should ask who stole her life first." Birdie snapped. The sheriff paused, tipping his hat. "You always did talk pretty fierce, but you can't outrun a warrant forever." He climbed back onto the wagon and muttered, "Ride fast, Silas. You're going to need every mile." The ride to Devil's Basin. The plain stretched wide and empty, yellow grass rippling under a white-hot sky. Clara sat behind Boone, clutching his coat as they rode hard westward toward the distant shadow canyons. "Where we going?" she finally asked over the wind. "Devil's Basin," Boone said. "Ain't much of a name for a safe place, but it's quiet, and folks mind their own business." "Why are we hiding?" Boone hesitated. "Because your stepmother's got papers saying she owns you, and men with papers tend to talk louder than men with truth." Clara frowned. "Then maybe truth needs a louder man." Boone almost laughed. Almost. They rode until sundown, the red sky bleeding across the horizon. Coyotes began to sing, and the smell of sage filled the air. They made camp by a half-dry creek, eating cold biscuits and jerky. Boone spread his duster on the ground for her. "You sleep? I'll keep watch." "You ain't gonna rest?" He shook his head. "Not tonight." Sometime near midnight, Clara stirred. The moonlight fell pale on Boone's face. His hat had slipped, revealing a scar that curved like lightning over his temple. She'd always wondered how he got it. In her sleep-fogged voice, she whispered, "You fight outlaws?" He didn't answer right away. "Once fought something meaner. Myself." Then, softer, "Go back to sleep? little one. But Clara didn't. She watched him sit by the fire, head bowed, holding something small, a locket, her locket. He opened it and stared inside. And though she couldn't see what was in it, she heard him whisper, "Forgive me, Lila. I should have been there that day." The secret of Silas Boone. The next morning, they reached the edge of Devil's Basin, a ring of red rock cliffs hiding a patch of green valley below. It looked peaceful, almost holy. Boone led the horse down the narrow path. "Careful not to spook it. We'll lay low here a while," he said. "Ain't nobody finds this place unless they're lost." He built a small camp and fetched water while Clara wandered among wildflowers, humming. For the first time in days, she smiled. But peace on the frontier never lasts. By afternoon, Boone spotted a dust trail, a rider approaching fast from the north. He raised his rifle. When the rider drew close, Boone lowered the barrel, shocked. "Jed." Sheriff Crane dismounted, hat low, face grim. "You sure know how to make my job miserable." Boone's jaw tightened. "You come to arrest me?" "Not yet. I came to warn you. Martha Hensley ain't riding alone. She hired Pinkertons." Boone's blood went cold. "Pinkertons? For a child?" The sheriff nodded. "She told them the girl's worth money, some inheritance business from her real father." Boone blinked. "Her real father?" The sheriff looked uneasy. "Boone, you know?" A name from the past. Crane handed Boone a folded document. "Found this in the county records. You might want to read it." Boone opened it, and the words hit him like a hammer. "Birth certificate. Clara May Hensley, daughter of Lila Hensley and Silas Boone." The paper trembled in his hand. "Sweet mercy," he muttered. The sheriff nodded. "She never told you, huh? Lila named the girl before she passed. That's why Martha wants her. Figures the estate's in Clara's name. You're her next of kin." Boone staggered back, dizzy with shock. "My daughter—" Behind them, Clara was feeding the horse wildflowers, humming like any child with no idea her whole world just changed. The sheriff sighed. "You best tell her soon. Pinkertons don't wait for bedtime stories." That evening, Boone sat by the campfire while Clara played with a stick in the dirt, drawing circles. He tried 3 times to start the sentence. None came out right. Finally, "Clara, there's something I got to tell you." She looked up, smiling. "That we're safe now?" He swallowed hard. "Not quite. It's about your mama." Her smile faded. "You knew her, didn't you?" He nodded. "Better than most men ever deserved to know anyone. We were in love once." Clara's voice went small. "Then why didn't you come for us?" Boone's face fell like a crumbling canyon wall. "I didn't know, sweetheart. I didn't know she had you. Your mama left after I went to war. By the time I came back—" His voice broke. "She was gone," he whispered. "And so was you." Clara stared at him, eyes wide with hurt and confusion. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "I ain't mad," she said. "I reckon God just waited to bring us together when we both needed it most." Boone blinked fast, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Your mama always said you'd have her heart," he murmured. "But I see now you got her courage too." That same night, under a slice of moon, the bushes near the creek rustled. A man in a dark hat whispered, "Tracks lead here." Another answered, "Orders are bring the girl alive." Boone, if necessary, not so much. 5 riders moved silently through brush, guns ready, spurs muted. One of them pulled a photograph from his coat. Clara, standing beside Boone Hollow's corral. "Easy job," he grinned. "Just a kid." But in the basin, Boone was already awake, rifle across his knees. He'd smelled the trouble long before they did. He looked over at Clara, sleeping peacefully under a blanket. Then he whispered to the wind, "Over my dead body." The gunfight at Devil's Basin, and the girl who chose her father. Morning broke hard over Devil's Basin. The first streaks of sunlight hit the cliffs, turning the red rock gold. The air smelled of dust, fear, and the last embers of last night's fire. Clara stirred beneath her blanket. Boone was already on his feet, cleaning his Winchester, eyes darting between the horizon and the ridge above. He hadn't slept a wink. He didn't have to say it. The girl could feel it in her bones. Something bad was coming. A father's burden. "Clara," he said softly, "we might have company soon. If anything happens, you take the pony and ride east till the land flattens out. Don't stop. Don't look back." Clara sat up, frowning. "But I ain't running again. I ran once already. You found me. Ain't fair if I leave you now." Boone stared at her, this tiny scrap of a girl with dirt on her cheeks and fire in her eyes, and for a moment he saw her mother again. "Sweetheart," he said, voice cracking, "you're my blood. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you breathing. That's my job now." She looked up at him. "Then let me help. Mama always said bravery don't come from being strong. It comes from loving somebody enough to be scared." Boone froze. The words cut straight through him like a blade made of memory. "You sound just like her," he whispered. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the basin was alive with noise. Birds screeching, horses stamping, wind curling dust through the rocks. Boone's instincts kicked in. He could feel eyes on them, watching, measuring distance. He motioned for Clara to crouch low behind a fallen log. Then he called out, "You boys riding honest or hiding like thieves?" A voice answered from the ridge, smooth, cold, and smug. "Well now, Mr. Boone, depends who you ask. The lady that hired us as you're the thief. Took her property." Boone spat in the dirt. "Ain't a child property. Tell your lady to come down here and say that herself." The men laughed. There were at least 5 of them, maybe 6. Pinkertons, well paid and merciless. Their rifles glinted in the morning light like fangs. Clara grabbed Boone's sleeve. "Pa!" The word hit him like a gunshot. "Pa!" He squeezed her hand once, then stood tall. "Stay down, darling." The first bullet tore through the campfire embers, scattering sparks. Boone ducked behind a boulder, firing back. 2 Pinkertons took cover behind their horses. Smoke filled the air. The echoes bounced off the canyon walls like thunder. Clara covered her ears and pressed her face into the dirt, praying to a god she wasn't sure was listening. Boone rolled to another rock, firing methodically, one shot, one breath, one prayer. A man screamed and fell. The others cursed and spread out. Then, through the chaos, a familiar voice cut through the gunfire. "Enough!" The Pinkertons stopped. At the ridge, sitting astride a black horse and dressed head to toe in morning black, sat Martha Hensley, Clara's stepmother. Her veil fluttered in the dry wind like the wing of a crow. Well, Martha called out, voice sharp as glass. "Ain't this poetic? The poor little orphan and her daddy outlaw, playing house in the dirt." Boone stood, rifle aimed. "You got a lot of nerve, riding down here after what you did." She smiled coldly. "I did what I had to. Her daddy left money in her name, money that should have been mine. She ain't a ledger entry, Martha. She's a child." Martha's smile vanished. "Ain't no child that cost me my inheritance. The law says she's worth $10,000, and I intend to collect one way or another." Then, lowering her voice, "You hand her over, Silas. You walk away clean." Boone cocked the rifle. "Lady, I already died once a love. Ain't about to do it for greed." Before anyone could move, Clara climbed out from behind the log, her small hands clenched, her voice trembling but steady. "You don't own me, Miss Martha. You can't buy what you never wanted." Martha's face twisted. "You little wretch. You're nothing but a stain on my life." Boone stepped in front of her, fury blazing in his eyes. "You so much as breathe wrong at her, I'll—" The shot rang out. Boone stumbled, dropping to one knee. Blood blossomed through his shirt. "Pa!" Clara screamed. The Pinkerton who fired froze in shock. He'd been aiming for Boone's shoulder, not his heart. Boone fell, still gripping his rifle. He fired once more, the bullet striking the shooter square in the chest. Both men went down. The world fell silent except for the wind. Martha dismounted slowly, stepping toward Clara, who knelt beside Boone's bleeding body. "See, girl," Martha hissed. "He ain't your salvation. He's your curse. Everything he touches dies." Clara glared up at her, tears streaming down her dusty face. "You're wrong. He's the only one who ever wanted me. Martha raised her pistol. A shot cracked. Martha froze, eyes wide in disbelief, and dropped her gun. Behind her stood Sheriff Crane, rifle still smoking. "Reckon the law finally caught up, ma'am," he said grimly. Martha tried to speak, but fell face first into the dust. Boone coughed weakly. "Jed, you sure know how to make an entrance." Crane rushed over, dropping beside him. "You hang on, Silas. Doc's in town. We can—" Boone shook his head slowly. "No time. Just make sure she's safe." He looked at Clara, struggling to focus. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, for all the years I missed." Clara grabbed his hand, sobbing. "You didn't miss 'em, Pa. You just found the right ones." Boone smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made you believe heaven might not be too far away. "Atta girl," he whispered. Then the light went out of his eyes. Justice and mercy. A week later, Devil's Basin was quiet again. The sheriff's men buried Boone under a cottonwood tree overlooking the valley. On his grave, Clara laid the locket, the one that had belonged to her mama. Bertie came from town with tears in her eyes and a cart full of biscuits. "He'd be proud of you, sugar," she said softly. Clara nodded. He already was. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Got papers here making you his legal heir, Clara. Means you own the Boone Ranch now. Guess that makes you the richest cowgirl in 3 counties. Clara smiled sadly. "Then I reckon I'll spend it making sure no kid sleeps cold or hungry again." At sunset, she saddled her father's gray horse, tied her bonnet under her chin, and turned toward the open prairie. The wind tugged at her hair. The land seemed endless, full of pain and promise. She whispered, "I'll keep riding, Pa, just like you taught me." Then she rode out of Devil's Basin, a dust trail behind her and a whole horizon ahead. The orphan girl who became her own legend. And some folks say, years later, when travelers pass through Boone Hollow, they'd still see her riding at dusk, tall, brave, and free, a girl who found a father, lost him, and became the heart of the West herself. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more intriguing videos.